So today we're gonna look at one of my absolute favorite sequences in the long-running James Bond series. The sequence in question is from Bond film number 12, which is For Your Eyes Only, starring Roger Moore and directed by John Glenn. The sequence portrays Bond and leading lady Melina Havelock diving down to a shipwreck to retrieve the ATAC transmitter, which in the wrong hands could spell doom for the UK defense systems. I think this is an excellent tension-filled sequence, although I've never seen this piece of filmmaking get much love here on YouTube, so I might be pretty alone in my opinion. And nevertheless, I feel it's time to have a look at these scenes and why they work so well. It's also notable that this was one of the few times the Bond series flirted with the horror genre, and the next time would be almost 40 years later in No Time to Die. And naturally there will be spoilers along the way. So for those who doesn't know, the movie starts off with the British surveillance ship, the St. George's, being sunk off the Albanian coast as it gets a mine stuck in its fishing nets. And on the ship is the ATAC transmitter. James Bond is set out to find the transmitter before it's captured by the Russians. Bond teams up with Melina Havelock, the daughter of a murdered marine archaeologist, to find the wreck of the St. George's. And a little past the halfway point of the movie, they are heading down into the waters to try and locate the wreck using a two-man submarine. Okay, so here we go, as we see the sub descending into the dark waters. A really interesting choice of music here. Regular composer John Barry was replaced this time around with Bill Conti, and Conti uses the Bond theme here, but it's kind of a darker version. It's not the usual thrilling tune we're used to, but more subdued and dark. We get a sense that danger will lurk down here. The exterior shots of the sub was shot in the Bahamas, while the interiors of the sub was shot at Pinewood Studios. So a blip shows up on the sonoscope and we see the wreck. Again, the music is not triumphant or exhilarating, just a sense of foreboding and eeriness. Beautiful model work here. The wreck is much larger than the sub, dark and hostile. It's like Bond and Melina is about to enter a haunted house, which in a sense they are. So we see the sub come to a halt from an angle taken inside the wreck. We see the bent remains of the hull where the mine exploded, almost like the sub is in the jaws of a beast. A searchlight is turned off. Just a subtle detail, but in a sense it tells us that things are about to become a lot darker.
An oxygen-helium mix at that depth will give us 8 minutes. We're going to have to work fast.
Classic trope of the adventure and thriller genre, a ticking clock. They won't have much time at all to complete the mission, so the pressure is already on. It also tells us that they can't afford to lose any of the gas supply whatsoever, something that will come into play later.
Wouldn't the St. George's crew have destroyed the transmitter?
Only if they'd had the chance to set the explosive timer.
A little reminder here that there is an explosive timer on the ship connected to the ATAC, something that people might have forgot since they saw the interior of the ship in the beginning of the movie. Notice also the red light, another little subtle nod that danger is coming. We might not even pay much attention to it, but subconsciously we take it in. And another light is turned off. Things are getting darker. Bond and Melina enters the diver's chamber and puts on the gear. The music has been playing in the background up to this point, but now it goes silent, which makes it more impactful when it returns just a little later. A quick cut to the surface as the bad guys board Melina's ship. It's the only time we cut to the surface during this sequence. It gives immediate suspense to the proceedings and tells us danger is approaching. But of course Bond and Melina doesn't know this. It's one of those tricks of achieving tension that Alfred Hitchcock talked about, letting the audience know more than the main characters. Back to Bond and Melina. Nice choice of color on their suits. The yellow makes a good contrast to all the blue and also makes them easy to see. They approach the hole in the ship and the music comes back on. A nice little jump scare and the following joke from Bond to ease the tension.
I hope he was dining alone.
It really is the only bit of levity we get in this entire sequence. Amazing job here, by the way. You're actually looking at the visual effects. I had no idea until the DVDs was released back in the day and the magic trick was revealed in the behind-the-scenes documentaries. The close-ups was actually shot on dry land with a higher frame rate on the camera, slowing things down a bit. And the air bubbles was added in later optically. No computer effects here whatsoever, as the digital revolution was more or less a decade into the future. So this was shot in a tank at Pinewood Studios. Realistically, it would be pitch black in here, but the soft blue light blends in beautifully and it doesn't really look lit. Another touch of red here to remind us that danger is approaching. Interestingly, there was no red phone on this desk in the beginning of the movie, so it was placed here when it was time to film the underwater scenes. There was a red phone in the control center, but it was across the room, so I assume it could have drifted over here. Nevertheless, it's a nice touch. It also carries a bit of symbolism, a phone floating into nothingness, like no use calling for help because no rescue is coming. We get these haunting shots of the dead crew members, a subtle reminder that Bond and Melina might end up just like them if they're not careful. And these shots also provide a haunting contrast to the beginning of the movie, this shot being more or less a replica of what we saw in the beginning. When it comes to action and tension, getting a sense of the layout of the room is really important. And a nice thing about this scene is that we've actually gotten a sense of the layout earlier in the movie, before the ship was sunk. So we know roughly where things are and how the rooms connect. Melina spots one of the crew members and screams. I'll admit that she does turn into a little bit of a damsel in distress in this sequence, which is a contrast to how her character acts in the movie as a whole. On the other hand, she really helps to sell the fear and being the voice of the audience. Had she been more cool and collected, it wouldn't have been quite as impactful. And as a whole, I don't think it hurts her character all that much. I mean, personally, I very much understand her fear, and I think many of us would have freaked out as well. And to her credit, when Bond tells her she should go back to the sub and wait, she decides to stay, which I think is a sign of true courage. Keep going and don't let the fear get the better of you. So Bond and Melina heads to the command cabin, and by now the tension is firmly set in place, and the horror. It really is a nightmarish landscape they've entered, and it's about to get a lot worse. Bond spots the ATAC, some red details here again, and lights, somehow still blinking, and the word danger written on the computer terminal. We see the fallen crew member that died at his post. There is an interesting little somber moment here that really is sort of blink and you'll miss it. The man's eyes is almost looking into the camera, and there's just a tiny little acknowledgement from Bond and almost a look of sadness. Bond was in the Navy before he was recruited to the Secret Service, so seeing a man dead like this, chained up with no chance of escaping as the ship was going down, probably hit close to home for him, so to speak.
Man destruct timer under lever right of ATAC housing dual.
And notice the music has stopped once more. Another wonderful use of silence or near silence.
The destruct timer set at 1 minute. For some reason the lever wasn't pulled.
Bond explains the setup to Melina, and of course also to the audience. We see the bomb with a 1 minute timer, which will come in play real soon. So here comes what will turn out to be a diver in a JIM diving suit. Music kicks in and we hear a really creepy breathing. and we see the 2 dead crew members once more. So this tells us that this is the place Bond and Melina were just a few minutes ago. And it's also a subtle hint that there could be 2 more dead bodies down here real soon. Notice also the red phone again. Interestingly, its position has changed a little bit since we last saw it. Probably because it looked slightly better turned around when it was shot from this angle. But we don't really notice unless we overanalyze the sequence. But it's clear that it's no accident that the filmmakers put that prop here. And some logical holes you just have to accept, like how on earth the gym diver managed to squeeze through this tiny little doorway. But at this point we don't really have a reference exactly how large he is. Back with Bond and Melina, and once more the music goes silent. Interesting to note that in the screenplay they keep noting again and again how much air or gas supply they have left. But I think in the end, director John Glenn and editor John Grover realized that it really wasn't necessary, since the whole thing was so tense to begin with and it would have been like overkill. So time to cut the wires to the explosive device. I think this could be the first time in film history where we had the now pretty common cutting the wires in the right order to defuse the bomb scene. But not much time is spent on it, which I think was the right call. It's only a few seconds, but it's enough. I have very few nitpicks with this sequence, but maybe one thing that could have been done a little differently was to say cut the 3 wires, beginning with the middle one, then the right one, then the left, just to mix it up a little bit instead of just going left to right. But it's a minor issue. We go closer on Melina's eyes, increasing the tension even more. Credit to Carol Bouquet here, emoting with just her eyes. Great job. And back to the point of view of the attacker, now getting really close. Nice touch to have the flashlights flicker behind the door to give us an extra sense of geography. Music is on and off, creating just a moment of relief before the action kicks off.
That's it. Let's get out of here.
And a great line reading from Roger, having this reassuring tone in his voice. We should remember that none of the lines we hear were recorded on set. All this would have been recorded in a sound booth months later. And enter the gym diver, and the music kicks in. Many people would probably have been confused by this back in 1981. Like, what is that? Like a robot of some kind? Well, the beautiful thing is that this suit was explained by Bond in an earlier scene during a shootout in a warehouse.
JIM diving equipment for salvage work at depths of more than 300 feet.
So thanks to this, we know exactly what we're looking at. I think it's these little storytelling details that really elevates the movie to the next level. It's no accident that the Bond series has been going on for more than half a century now. Notice the red color, once more making an appearance. Underwater scenes tend to be kind of slow, giving the natural limitations when you're underwater, and any sort of fast and energetic moves are more or less impossible. But I think this is a rare exception, as I always found this scene really tense and scary. But they must have provided a real challenge. The gym diving suit is really huge and slow to move around. So the filmmakers really had to be inventive with this. His options to go on the attack would be really limited and would only really work if his opponents were cornered, which is what happens here. So we have a whack and down goes Bond. It's actually kind of rare to see him knocked down like this and be out of action, even for only a few seconds. The gym diver uses one of his hooks and lifts up Melina. And remember the talk of being careful with the gas supply? I mean, this shot would probably have been scary anyway, but since we know how precious little gas supply they have, it adds to the horror. Again, in the screenplay, Melina running out of oxygen was a huge part of the rest of this scene, but it probably felt like too many moving parts at once. So Bond has still not recovered. He actually feels really human in this scene, and there are no gadgets to help him out, so he has to improvise fast. and we know exactly how much time he will have once he pulls the pin on the bomb. And the music is not pounding or overbearing, kind of subdued but really effective. So Bond places the bomb on the gym diver and escapes with Melina, and the diver tries to get the bomb off. In the screenplay, things played out a little differently, as the gym diver dropped the ATAC and tried to reach behind his back with his arms to remove the bomb, unsuccessfully, and then Bond grabbed the ATAC and headed towards the exit with Melina. But somehow the gym diver cut off their exit and there was another struggle. But somewhere down the line, the filmmakers probably realized that it was just not possible for him to realistically catch up to them. So things were changed around. And changes like this are actually really common. What's on paper doesn't always translate well to the screen. So the gym diver still has the ATAC and the bomb is ticking. Bond grabs what I think is a monitor and whacks the gym diver. And this glass screen that lasted through the entire sinking is now broken. A hint that the climax of the sequence is approaching. So one final hurdle to overcome, and Bond just manages to get out of there. And of course the seconds on the bomb doesn't exactly match up to the screen time, but I still buy it. The actual time from when the timer starts ticking to the eventual explosion is actually 95 seconds. The music tells us something big is coming, almost sounding like a siren on some sort of emergency vehicle. This is actually the only full shot we get of the gym diver, and it really gives us a sense of exactly how cumbersome this suit was to work with. So that they managed to make him as fast and threatening as he is really a testament to the filmmakers. One final oh shit, and boom goes the gym diver. Beautiful model shot here. Some lighting effects added in and 3 full frames of white just to add some extra punch. We can see the extra lights here to amplify the explosion in this next model shot, but it moves so fast that it's more or less impossible to catch at normal speed. And a little bit of red as we see blood. I've never been quite sure if this was supposed to be Bond's blood or the gym diver. Nevertheless, it's so quick, so it's still family friendly, so to speak. So Bond and Melina head back to the sub with the ATAC, only to discover that there is another threat coming in the form of another sub full of pinchers and drills. It's sort of a repeat of what we just saw, but I see it as sort of dessert after the main course, so I don't really mind it. Who says no to some extra action in a Bond movie? So that's it. A great piece of filmmaking, and it struck me as I analyzed it how timeless it is. Sure, some of the tech has changed, but besides that, I don't think this sequence would have looked out of place in a modern movie. A key to a sequence like this is a detailed storyboard, and if you own the DVD or Blu-ray, you can check them out. Just a little example of the work that was put in. Look at the different angles of the timer on the bomb. I mean, the easy thing would be to just set the timer and then do one close-up of it in a fish tank or something like that. Push record and then let it run for 60 seconds and you're done. But every shot of it is a slightly different angle with constantly changing lights, which means we never get bored of the shot and things feel interesting. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again next time.